I think for me, so Donna, I didn't mention that I've was with Tom on this last year. This is kind of my second round, which has been nice as far as a refresher and going back. It does take a bit just to remember what did I do and piecing it together, and even thinking about this week in terms of the teaching, learning and or assessment. I remember that being quite involved as far as trying to pull all that together and thinking about the referencing, but
yeah.
It's certainly rewarding afterwards to look back on it.
Yeah.
So things even today or this week have been even just remembering how to post a project onto or submit a project. I guess that's the things with technology is you have to continually use it to be able to keep it fresh. Mm.
Yeah, and I think with your portfolio, the key is kind of thinking ahead, I suppose, and providing ways of generating evidence, just as your normal sort of workflow and productivity. So, the more you can put online and share, the more evidence you're going to have for your portfolio later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess one of the ways that I suggest for this particular part of the portfolio, which is looking at curriculum design, really. Do you understand the process of designing an assessment? How do you go about providing feedback to students? How do you put guidelines around the assessment process? Things like creating a rubric for a marking schedule. All those sorts of stuff is great evidence. So you've got that, probably on your computer as Word documents. It would be simple to take screenshots of those, turn them into a PDF, link them onto your blog, whatever site you're using, or even as a Google Doc, and then giving people link access, view access to your Google Doc version of it.
Mm.
So I find it's actually a really good way to collaborate on curriculum design and assessment generation, is to use something like collaborative Google Docs or Office 365, etc. Google Docs is probably a little bit more open,
yeah,
and more easy to share. So yeah, thanks for that that sort of intro there, Todd. So we're really looking at week 3 of the CMALT CMOOC, which is teaching, learning, and assessment. So I thought I'd just go into screen sharing mode, but yeah, feel free to discuss and share your ideas, and I'm just going to bring up a window. So this is on our cmooc.wordpress.com site for activity week 3. It's the current blog post. And I suppose, yeah, I kind of think it's probably the easiest part of the portfolio to pull together, because it's about, if you're involved in education, it's very much the core of what you do is designing teaching, learning environments, designing assessments, delivering them, getting feedback. It should really be a core part of what you do as a teacher. The issue then is providing evidence of that, and then critiquing it, evaluating it, thinking through it. So every part of your CMALT portfolio, there's 2 core elements of it. One is providing evidence of engagement with that sort of activity, and in particular with CMALT, it's how you've integrated technology into teaching, learning, and assessment. And the second core part of any section is the reflection upon that. How have you modified, your teaching and learning approach based on perhaps student feedback or colleague feedback? How have you gone about generating that sort of feedback loop to make sure that what you're doing with teaching and learning and assessment is actually aligned properly, and that students are getting the point? Are they understanding what they need to learn, what the outcomes are, etc.? So thinking through a little bit of theory as well, something like John Biggs' constructive alignment is a really good approach, where it's about what are you trying to achieve, what are the graduate outcomes, what's the goal of the course, and then linking that back through into how have you designed an assessment to measure that? Is it the appropriate sort of assessment? Have you given students the right sort of guidelines, and are there feedback opportunities? So providing evidence of all that sort of workflow. So this week we've kind of suggested a couple of activities for people to do just to get them thinking. One is to take our little Scholarship of Technology Enhanced Learning survey. So I don't know if you've done that yet, Donna. I think Todd's probably done it before.
Yeah.
So it's just a really short sort of 10-question survey, and the real idea behind it is just to try to get you thinking about how you engage with students, and perhaps give you some ideas of how you can broaden that out a bit. How did you find the survey and the questions, Donna?
Yeah, pretty good. There was a couple of things I had to Google what they meant, just because it's like a whole new language being in the education sector, I find now. But I found it very useful, and it was good reading other people's comments where they'd elaborated on things they were using. That was really helpful to go through and read what other people had put, where they've written a little paragraph about their findings. So that was good.
Yeah, and I think that's the point of what we're trying to establish with the project bank, is like a database of shared ideas. Because it's easier to get the idea if you can see someone else's attempt at doing it, and not necessarily someone who's an expert as such, but someone just like you.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully the survey was useful in generating a bit of ideas. So for those who haven't done the survey, just recommend that you do it. It's anonymous, of course, and it'll only take you sort of 5 to 10 minutes at the most. So the second thing we've suggested is to, if you haven't before, maybe collaborate with some of your peers and design an assessment. Go through the process of designing it, and perhaps use Google Docs to do that, to enable that, so that you can do that anywhere and a bit more flexibly, and give each other feedback on that assessment design, and then perhaps post that in as an example into the project bank. And then finally, to participate in this webinar. So we've got a couple of people join us, which is Donna all the way from Nelson, and Todd all the way from Auckland in physiotherapy. But I'm sure people will be watching it later as well. So as far as breaking down, what does this section of your portfolio look like as far as getting CMALT accreditation go? There's two main areas of evidence that you need to provide. So it's an understanding of teaching, learning, and or assessment processes. So sort of critically thinking through how you go about teaching, why you do it, and trying to provide some evidence. So it could be a link to a YouTube video of you engaging with students or doing a workshop. It could be a workshop outline or a lecture outline, a lecture plan, and sort of trying to link it to the outcomes. And then secondly, an understanding of your target learners. So I guess that's key in any sort of teaching or learning environment, is who are your learners, and are you actually meeting their needs? How are you personalizing the learning environment? How are you targeting for your specific cohort of students, which changes every time? So one of the ways that we do it is we do little surveys. So this can be like a hands up in class, or like we've done a Survey Monkey with our little Sottles survey there as a bit of an example, is just put something very quick and easy online, and it doesn't have to cost you anything. We just use the free version of Survey Monkey, which is why we're limited to 10 questions, but at the end of the day, no one wants to answer more than 10 anyway. It becomes a bit of an intrusion on you. And just get some really quick feedback on where your students are at, and in evaluation processes. So those are the two core areas of this week, of this section of your portfolio. So I'm just going to screen sharing now and just go back into discussion. So does that kind of make sense for you two? I mean, is there anything there that you really think is difficult or hard, or you're not quite sure about?
So I'm just going back as far as with the survey, and there's probably others that might view this later on that have done the CMALT before. Would it be something that I could go back and do again, or do you prefer it that it's just one capture of time?
No, I think you could go back and do it again. I mean, as far as the data goes, dates are logged as such. So you know, if you wanted to even identify what you'd done previously and compare it to a second go, I mean, we could probably find that as far as the date goes. We can't identify individual users. We haven't done that. Yeah, sure. And I think your practice does change. So even reflecting on that and thinking through, if you can remember what your answers were before, or what has changed and why. Yeah. So I think the key limitation to put there is like the IP address of your computer. You can't do this survey twice with the same device.
Yeah.
And so if you're on a computer that's on DHCP or something, or a different computer, then you can log in quite happily and redo it.
I was just thinking in terms of, I was trying to comment on Hayden's, I think he did his ecology of resources. And it made me think as to how I've probably adapted since when I first filled out that or had my screenshot of it, that's changed over the last year or so. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's the same in terms of answering some of those questions and about personal philosophy, for instance.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. And a lot of that's just awareness as well. So I think most lecturers just do stuff. They do stuff that they've done in the past, it's worked, or they just do things intuitively, and it may be exactly what you need to do, and it may be what the theory says, but they haven't necessarily looked at the teaching and learning theory that supports what they're doing. So being able to find teaching and learning theory that backs up what you do in teaching and learning and assessment, or for you to think through different ways of doing it is quite, can be a real eureka moment for you, and it'll be beneficial for you and for your learners.
I think for me, it's probably quite timely doing this now, because having just redeveloped our programs to begin this year, we have looked at our assessments, how we're even the tools that we're asking the learners to use. For example, previous years they've filled in a paper self-assessment, whereas now we've shifted it to be on Moodle and it's in quiz format. So we've looked at different ways where we can improve our assignments and those types of things. So we've got quite a lot of evidence for that at the moment, and it's very fresh. So I think it's a good time to be doing this. Yeah.
And of course, once again, by doing that online, it's much easier to provide that as evidence than having to collate a whole lot of physical copies of stuff students have filled in.
Yeah.
Well, I think we kind of covered this week, really. As I say, I think it's probably the most intuitive part of the portfolio. The key thing is just gathering that evidence and then reflecting on it, just like any of the sections. But thank you, Donna, and thank you, Todd, for joining us today. And look forward to seeing what you share in the project bank and in the discussion forums. It's great to have had you two really participating and being two of the key people sharing what you're doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Good to meet you again, Donna.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, so I'll stop the broadcast now. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.